door, smiling. We came for what's ours. The doorbell rang at exactly 9:30 on a Saturday morning, the kind of bright spring day that made you believe good things were possible. I was still in my bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, hair piled messily on top of my head, enjoying the rare luxury of a slow weekend morning. Through the frosted glass of my front door, I could see two figures standing on my porch, their silhouettes backlit by sunshine. I opened the door expecting neighbors or maybe a delivery, and instead found myself face to face with my ex-husband, Derek, and a woman I had never met but instantly recognized from the social media photos I had tortured myself with during the divorce. She was younger than me by at least 10 years, with glossy blonde hair that caught the light like spun gold, wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire week's grocery budget. Her smile was wide and confident, the smile of someone who believed the world owed her whatever she wanted. Derek stood slightly behind her, his hands shoved in his pockets, looking uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to have prevented this ambush. He had the decency to avoid meeting my eyes, staring instead at the porch floorboards like they held the secrets of the universe. "Good morning, Natalie," the woman said, her voice bright and cheerful like we were old friends meeting for brunch. "I'm Amber, Derek's wife. We came for what's ours." The words hit me like ice water, shocking and immediate. I stood there gripping my coffee mug so tightly. I was surprised it did not shatter, trying to process what was happening, trying to understand why my ex-husband and his new wife were standing on my doorstep, making claims about ownership. "Excuse me?" I managed finally, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. Amber's smile never wavered. "The house, sweetie. This house. It's half Derek's, and we're ready to collect. We've been very patient, but we need the equity to buy our own place, so we're here to discuss arrangements for you to buy out his share, or sell, so we can split the proceeds. I'm sure you understand." I looked past her to Derek, waiting for him to say something, to explain, to tell her she was mistaken, but he just stood there, silent and useless, letting this stranger speak for him, letting her call me sweetie in my own doorway, letting her make demands about my home. "This house is mine," I said, finding my voice, feeling anger beginning to burn through the shock. "The divorce was finalized 8 months ago. Everything was settled. You have no claim here." "Actually," Amber said, pulling a folder from her enormous designer purse. "Oh, we've consulted with our attorney, and there was an error in the divorce settlement. The house was never properly transferred solely to your name. Derek retained partial ownership, which means we're entitled to half its value. We're not trying to be difficult, but we have rights." She held out the folder like she was doing me a favor, like this was all very reasonable and civilized. I did not take it. I just stood there feeling my carefully rebuilt life crumbling around me, feeling the security I had fought so hard to create slipping away. "Get off my property," I said quietly. "Both of you. Now. There's no need to be hostile," Amber continued, her smile finally fading into something harder. "We're all adults here. We can handle this maturely. Derek has been more than fair giving you time to adjust to the divorce, but enough is enough. We need what we're owed. You're owed nothing. This is my house. I paid for it. I maintained it. I kept it when Derek walked away from our marriage and our life together. Whatever your lawyer told you is wrong. Now leave before I call the police." Derek finally spoke, his voice weak and apologetic, in that way I had come to hate during the final years of our marriage. "Nat, please, just look at the paperwork. We're not trying to hurt you. We just need to sort this out fairly." "Fairly?" The word came out like a laugh, sharp and bitter. "You want to talk about fair? Get off my porch, Derek. Take your wife and your paperwork and your attorney's lies and get away from my home." I closed the door in their faces, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the lock. Through the frosted glass, I could see them standing there for another minute. Amber saying something to Derek, probably telling him what a difficult person I was, how unreasonable, how I was making everything harder than it needed to be. Then they turned and walked away, their footsteps echoing on the wooden porch steps, a car door slamming, an engine starting, The sound fading into the quiet neighborhood morning, I sank down onto the floor, right there in the entryway, my back against the door, coffee forgotten, and tried to remember how to breathe. The house suddenly felt different around me, less like a sanctuary and more like something fragile that could be taken away. Every piece of furniture I had carefully chosen, every paint color I had agonized over, every small improvement I had made with my own hands, all of it felt threatened by their presence, by their claims, by the possibility that maybe they were right, and I had been living in false security all these months. It was not supposed to be like this. None of it was supposed to be like this. 15 years ago, I had married Derek Crawford believing I had found my person, my partner, my future. We met at a friend's party when I was 26, and he was 28. Both of us young and optimistic and full of plans. He was charming and attentive, always saying the right things, making me feel like I was the most important person in any room. He worked in pharmaceutical sales and talked about how he was going to build something big, how we were going to have this amazing life together. I was a nurse at the county hospital, working long shifts in the emergency department, coming home exhausted but fulfilled. I loved my job, loved feeling like I was making a difference, loved the adrenaline and the purpose and the connection with patients. Derek said he admired my dedication, my compassion, my work ethic. He said I was exactly the kind of woman he had always hoped to find. We got married after dating for 2 years, a small ceremony at a vineyard with close friends and family. I wore my mother's wedding dress, altered to fit me, and Derek cried when I walked down the aisle. He promised to love me forever, to support my dreams, to build a life with me that honored both our ambitions. I believed every word. The first few years were good. We lived in a small apartment and saved money, both working hard, talking about buying a house and starting a family. I took extra shifts at the hospital to help build our down payment fund. Derek talked about promotions and bonuses that were always just around the corner. We were a team, partners in building our future. When we finally bought the house, a modest 3-bedroom craftsman in a quiet neighborhood, I felt like we had achieved something real and permanent. The house needed work, outdated kitchen and bathrooms, old carpet throughout, a yard that was mostly weeds. But I saw potential. I saw home. I threw myself into making it ours. I painted every room, refinished the hardwood floors that were hiding under the carpet, planted gardens, updated fixtures. Derek was traveling more for work, gone several days a week, so I did most of the improvements myself. I watched YouTube tutorials and learned to tile and install light fixtures and build raised garden beds. I spent my days off covered in paint and sawdust, transforming that house room by room into something beautiful. The down payment came almost entirely from my savings. I had been carefully putting away money since I started working as a nurse, living frugally, planning for a future that required security. Derek contributed some, but his income was less stable, his spending habits less disciplined. He liked expensive dinners and new electronics and impulsive purchases that he justified as necessary for work or for impressing clients. I was the saver, the planner, the one who made sure we stayed on track. When we bought the house, we put both names on the deed. That was what married couples did, right? What was mine was his, and what was his was mine. We were building this life together. I never questioned it. I trusted him completely. For the next 10 years, I poured everything into that house and our marriage. I worked full-time at the hospital, often picking up extra shifts to help with the mortgage and improvements. I did all the cooking and most of the cleaning. I maintained the yard and the repairs and the endless small tasks that keep a home functioning. Derek was gone more and more, his territory expanding, his travel schedule becoming increasingly demanding. He started missing dinners, then forgetting anniversaries, then canceling weekend plans because something came up with work. I told myself it was temporary, that he was building his career, that this sacrifice would pay off for both of us. I supported him without complaint, never asking him to turn down opportunities or choose me over his job. I believed I was being a good wife, a supportive partner, Someone who understood that building a life sometimes required unequal distribution of effort. We talked about starting a family, but the timing never seemed right. Derek wanted to wait until he made senior sales representative. Then he wanted to wait until we paid off more of the mortgage. Then he wanted to wait until his territory was more established. The goalposts kept moving, and I kept waiting, trusting that eventually we would get there, that eventually our real life would start. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed or ignored. The way he stopped asking about my day, the way he started scheduling calls during dinner, the way he flinched when I touched him unexpectedly, the way he kept his phone face down on every surface and took it with him even to the bathroom, the way our intimate life dwindled to almost nothing, him always too tired or too stressed or too distracted. I noticed, but I explained it away. Work pressure, exhaustion, normal marriage stuff. I read articles about keeping romance alive and tried to implement their suggestions. I planned date nights that Derek canceled. I bought lingerie that stayed in the drawer. I suggested couples therapy that he said we did not need. I kept trying, kept believing, kept investing in a relationship that was already over in every way, except legally. The first concrete sign came on a Tuesday evening 14 months ago. I was folding laundry in our bedroom when Derek's laptop, which he had left open on the dresser, chimed with an incoming message. I glanced at it reflexively and saw a preview of a text from someone named Amber, just a few words visible on the screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Wear that cologne I like." My heart stopped. I stood there holding one of Derek's work shirts, staring at those words, trying to make them mean something other than what they obviously meant. Maybe Amber was a colleague. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe there was some explanation that did not involve betrayal. I clicked on the message to see the full conversation, telling myself I was being paranoid, even as I scrolled through weeks of exchanges that made my stomach turn. Flirtation, plans to meet, explicit messages that left no room for misinterpretation. Photos I could not bear to look at for more than a second. Evidence of a relationship that had been going on for at least 6 months, carried out in hotel rooms during Derek's business trips, hidden behind his travel schedule, and my trust. When Derek came home that night, I was sitting in the living room with his laptop open on the coffee table, the messages displayed like an accusation. He walked in cheerful and unsuspecting, calling out a greeting, then stopped when he saw my face. "Who is Amber?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. He went pale, his eyes darting to the laptop, then back to me. I watched him calculate his response, weighing whether to deny or explain or apologize. I could see the moment he decided on the truth, his shoulders sagging, his face crumbling. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry, Nat. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." The apology felt rehearsed, like he had been preparing it for this exact moment. I sat there waiting for more, for an explanation that would make sense of this betrayal, for some indication that our 15 years together meant something worth fighting for. Instead, he told me he loved her, that it was not just an affair, but a real relationship, that he had been wanting to tell me for months, but could not find the right time, that he was sorry for hurting me, but he could not keep living a lie, that he wanted a divorce. The words washed over me like they were happening to someone else. I could not process that my husband, the man I had spent 15 years building a life with, was standing in our living room, telling me he loved someone else, that our marriage was over, that everything I thought was solid and permanent was actually already gone. "How long?" I managed to ask. 8 months. 8 months. While I was planning our anniversary dinner, he was falling in love with someone else. While I was researching fertility doctors because I thought maybe we were finally ready to try for a baby, he was building a secret relationship. While I was investing every spare moment and dollar into our home and our life, he was imagining a different future with a different person. "I want you to leave," I said quietly. "Nat, we need to talk about this. We need to figure out, leave. Now. Go to her. Go wherever you want. But get out of this house." He left that night with a suitcase of hastily packed clothes, and I sat in the house I had built and cried until I could not cry anymore, until exhaustion pulled me into a restless sleep on the couch because I could not bear to go into our bedroom. The divorce was ugly and drawn out, full of disputes about assets and accusations about who had contributed what to the marriage. Derek claimed he was entitled to half of everything because we had been partners. I pointed out that I had paid for most of the house, done all the work to improve it, maintained it while he was traveling and having affairs. His lawyer argued that his income had supported us during the marriage, even though my salary had been more stable and I had put far more into our joint accounts than he had. We fought over furniture and kitchen appliances and photograph albums. We argued about who should keep the wedding gifts and who had paid for which improvements to the house. It was petty and exhausting and broke my heart in new ways every day, watching the man I had loved become vindictive and calculating, willing to claim ownership of things he had never cared about, just to punish me for not accepting his betrayal gracefully. Throughout the divorce proceedings, Derek was already publicly with Amber, posting photos on social media, bringing her to events where mutual friends would see them, making no effort to be discreet. She was 28, beautiful in a very different way than me, working as a social media influencer or life coach or something equally vague that seemed to mostly involve posting photos of her expensive lifestyle. She came from money, which explained her designer wardrobe and luxury car, and the ease with which she navigated the world like it owed her whatever she wanted. Friends took sides. Some supported me, horrified by Derek's betrayal. Others maintained connections with both of us, claiming they did not want to choose, which felt like choosing him. A few suggested I should have seen it coming, that I should have paid more attention to my marriage, that maybe if I had been less focused on work and the house, I would have noticed him pulling away. Those friendships ended quickly. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia, who specialized in difficult divorces, fought hard for me. She documented every contribution I had made to the house, every improvement, every mortgage payment that had come from my account. She showed that Derek's income had been sporadic and often spent on personal expenses rather than household ones. She proved that I had been the primary financial contributor to our marriage and that the house should be awarded to me. The judge agreed. In the final settlement, I was granted sole ownership of the house in exchange for giving up any claim to Derek's retirement accounts and some other assets. It felt like a fair division, maybe even generous to him considering his behavior. The divorce was finalized 8 months ago. All the paperwork signed and processed, everything legally concluded. I had spent those 8 months rebuilding my life. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts, volunteering for committees, keeping busy to avoid thinking about the wreckage of my marriage. I started therapy to process the betrayal and the grief. I joined a divorce support group where I met other women going through similar pain. I slowly began to feel like maybe I could survive this. Maybe I could build a new life from the ashes of the old one. I dated a little, tentatively, nothing serious. I reconnected with hobbies I had abandoned during my marriage. I spent time with my sister and my friends. I painted my bedroom a color Derek would have hated. I rearranged furniture and bought new dishes, and slowly made the house feel like mine rather than ours. It was hard and lonely and painful, but it was also freeing. I was discovering who I was when I was not trying to be the perfect wife to a man who did not appreciate me. And now, just when I was starting to feel stable, just when I was beginning to believe the worst was behind me, Derek and Amber had shown up at my door claiming ownership of my home, threatening the security I had fought so hard to rebuild. I sat on the floor of my entryway for a long time that Saturday morning, feeling the panic rise and fall in waves. Then I did what I should have done immediately. I called Patricia. She answered on the third ring, her voice warm and professional even on a weekend morning. "Natalie, what's going on?" I explained what had happened, the visit, the claims, the folder Amber had tried to give me. Patricia listened without interrupting, and I could hear her typing in the background. probably pulling up my file. "They're bluffing," she said when I finished. "Or their lawyer is incompetent. The house was explicitly transferred to you in the settlement. Derek signed documents relinquishing any claim to it. There was no error. This is either a misunderstanding or a deliberate attempt to intimidate you. Why would they do that? Money, probably. Maybe they're in financial trouble and think they can pressure you into giving them something. Maybe Amber has expensive tastes, and Derek is realizing he can't afford her lifestyle. Maybe they're just vindictive and want to upset you. Does the motivation really matter? What do I do? First, don't engage with them directly. Don't take their calls. Don't respond to messages. Don't let them on your property again. If they show up, call the police. Second, I'll send a cease and desist letter to their attorney, making it clear that any further contact constitutes harassment. Third, I'll file a motion to have their lawyer sanctioned if they're making frivolous claims about the settlement. And fourth, you take a deep breath and remember that you've already won this fight. The house is yours. They can threaten all they want, but they have no legal standing. Her confidence helped calm the panic. Thank you, Patricia. I don't know what I would do without you. You'd figure it out because you're stronger than you think. But I'm glad you have me so you don't have to figure it out alone. I'll take care of this, Natalie. Don't let them steal your peace. You've earned it. After we hung up, I finally got up from the floor and made a fresh cup of coffee. My hands steadier now, my mind clearer. I looked around my house, at the walls I had painted and the floors I had refinished and the gardens visible through the windows. This was mine. I had earned it through years of work and sacrifice and love that had not been reciprocated. Derek had walked away from it, from me, from the life we had built. He did not get to come back now and claim pieces of what he had abandoned. But even as I told myself that, even as I tried to reclaim the peace I had been feeling that morning, I could not shake the image of Amber standing on my porch with that confident smile, calling me sweetie, claiming what was mine. The audacity of it enraged me, but underneath the rage was something else, fear. Not just that they might have some legal claim I did not understand, but that they would keep coming, keep pushing, keep trying to take from me until there was nothing left. I had learned during the divorce that Derek was not the man I thought I married. He was selfish and weak and willing to hurt people to avoid discomfort. But I had not fully understood until that morning that Amber was not just some young woman who had fallen for a married man. She was calculating. She was strategic. She was someone who saw what she wanted and felt entitled to take it, regardless of who got hurt in the process. Together they were a threat I had not prepared for, and I was going to have to figure out how to protect myself before they did more damage. Over the next few days, I tried to return to normal. I went to work and focused on my patients, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms of the emergency department. I came home and worked in my garden, pulling weeds and deadheading flowers, trying to find peace in the simple physical labor. I talked to my sister Maya on the phone, downplaying the incident because I did not want to worry her, telling her everything was fine, even though I jumped every time I heard a car slow down on my street. Patricia sent the cease and desist letter to Derek and Amber's attorney. She also reached out to colleagues in the legal community and discovered that their lawyer, a man named Grant Hewitt, had a reputation for aggressive tactics and questionable ethics. He specialized in finding loopholes and technicalities, and he was known for pressuring opposing parties into settlements through intimidation rather than legitimate legal arguments. He's exactly the kind of lawyer someone like Amber would hire, Patricia told me during a follow-up call. He's going to make noise and file motions and try to make you so miserable, you'll pay them something just to make them go away. But we're not going to let that happen. We're going to fight every single attempt, and we're going to make it clear that you're not an easy target. How long could this go on? Months, potentially. Maybe longer if they're really committed to being difficult. But, Natalie, listen to me. You have everything on your side. The law, the settlement, the documentation. They're going to lose. The only question is how much time and money they're willing to waste before they accept that. I hated that answer. I hated that even though I had already been through the trauma of divorce, even though I had already fought this battle and won, I was being forced to fight it again. I hated that Derek and Amber could disrupt my peace, could threaten my security, could make me feel unsafe in my own home just because they were entitled and vindictive. But I also felt something else stirring underneath the fear and anger. A cold, hard determination. They had picked the wrong person to intimidate. I had survived Derek's betrayal and the divorce and the lonely months of rebuilding. I had found my strength in the wreckage of my marriage, and I was not going to let them take anything more from me. A week after their visit, I received a formal letter from Grant Hewitt's office. It was full of legal jargon and veiled threats, claiming that there had been a clerical error in the recording of the divorce settlement, that Derek's ownership stake in the property had never been properly terminated, that they were prepared to file a lawsuit to claim his rightful share of the home's equity. The letter demanded that I either pay them $150,000, roughly half the house's estimated value, or agree to sell the property so they could receive their portion of the proceeds. They gave me 30 days to respond before they would file suit. I read the letter 3 times, feeling my blood pressure rise with each pass. Then I forwarded it to Patricia and waited for her response. She called within an hour, her voice tight with controlled anger. "This is garbage, pure garbage. He's citing a statute that doesn't apply to your situation and making claims that have no basis in the actual settlement agreement. He knows it's garbage. He's counting on you not knowing that and getting scared enough to give them money. So what do? We respond with a motion to dismiss based on the finalized settlement. We include documentation showing that all property transfers were properly executed and recorded. We point out that his claims have no merit and request that the court sanction him for filing a frivolous lawsuit. And then we prepare for them to get nasty. Nastier than this? Oh, honey, this is just the opening salvo. If they're willing to lie in legal filings, they're willing to do a lot worse. You need to protect yourself. Change your locks if you haven't already. Install security cameras. Document every interaction. Don't give them any ammunition they can use against you." I followed her advice. That weekend, I had new locks installed and set up a security camera system that would record anyone who approached my house. I backed up all my files and documents to cloud storage. I went through my social media and locked down my privacy settings. I felt ridiculous, like I was preparing for war. But Patricia insisted these precautions were necessary when dealing with people who had already shown they were willing to manipulate and lie. My friends rallied around me when I finally told them what was happening. My best friend Jennifer, who had been furious at Derek since the beginning, wanted to confront him directly. My co-worker Marcus offered to have some of his family members, who apparently were very intimidating, pay Derek and Amber a visit. I appreciated the support, but declined the offers, not wanting to give them any reason to claim I was harassing them. Maya, my younger sister, drove up from Portland to spend a weekend with me. We sat on my back porch drinking wine and talking about how unfair it all was, how Derek had taken so much from me already, and now wanted to take more. I never liked him, Maya confessed, even before the affair. He always seemed like he was performing being a good husband rather than actually being one, like he was following a script of what he thought he should do, rather than genuinely caring about you. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have listened? You were so in love with him, so committed to making the marriage work. I didn't want to be the sister who tried to sabotage your happiness. I thought maybe I was wrong about him. I wanted to be wrong. You weren't wrong. I know, and I'm sorry I didn't say something. Maybe if I had, you would have seen the signs earlier. Maybe you could have protected yourself better. Or maybe I would have just defended him and damaged our relationship. You can't blame yourself for my choices, Maya. I married him. I trusted him. I ignored the warning signs because I wanted to believe our marriage was solid. That's on me, not you. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds of the neighborhood, watching fireflies begin to appear in the growing darkness. Finally, Maya turned to me with a determined expression. "What are you going to do?" What do you mean? About Derek and Amber. Are you just going to let your lawyer handle it? Or are you going to fight back? What else can I do? Patricia says the law is on my side. We just have to wait for the courts to confirm that. The courts can take forever. And in the meantime, they get to harass you and disrupt your life and make you feel unsafe. That doesn't seem like justice to me. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe it's time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. Maybe it's time to remind Derek and his entitled girlfriend that you're not someone they can push around. Maybe it's time to make them regret coming after you. I looked at my sister, seeing something fierce in her expression that matched the anger I had been trying to suppress. What did you have in mind? I don't know yet, but I think we should figure it out together. That conversation planted a seed. Over the following days, as I waited for the legal process to unfold, I started thinking about what Maya had said. Why was I letting them control the narrative? Why was I waiting for courts and lawyers to protect me when I could protect myself? I started doing research. I looked into Derek's current employment status and discovered he had left his pharmaceutical sales job 6 months ago. His LinkedIn profile said he was now an independent consultant, which usually meant unemployed. I checked Amber's social media and saw that her posts had become increasingly focused on luxury items and expensive experiences, the kind of lifestyle that required significant income to maintain. I did some digging into property records and found that Derek was renting an apartment month to month, rather than owning or having a long-term lease. I checked court records and discovered they had small claims judgments against them from credit card companies. The picture that emerged was of 2 people living well beyond their means, probably drowning in debt, desperate for money. That desperation explained the aggressive pursuit of my house. They did not actually believe they had a legal claim. They were hoping I would be scared or tired enough to pay them something, anything, to make them go away. They were betting that I valued my peace more than the principal. They were wrong. I scheduled a meeting with Patricia to discuss strategy. She listened as I shared what I had discovered about Derek and Amber's financial situation, nodding thoughtfully. "So they're broke and desperate," she summarized. "That actually helps us. Desperate people make mistakes. They push too hard, overreach, give us ammunition to use against them. Can we use their financial problems in court? Not directly in the property dispute, but if they continue to harass you, if they escalate their behavior, their desperation becomes relevant. It shows motive for making false claims. It demonstrates that this isn't about legitimate ownership, but about extracting money they're not entitled to. What if we went on offense instead of just defense?" I asked, echoing Maya's suggestion. "What if we filed something against them? Like what? I don't know. Harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. There has to be something we can do to make them stop, beyond just waiting for them to give up." Patricia leaned back in her chair, considering. "We could potentially file for a restraining order based on their showing up at your house and making threats. We could include the frivolous lawsuit as evidence of a pattern of harassment. It might not be granted, but the process itself would be public record, which might embarrass them enough to back off. Let's do it. Natalie, I want you to think carefully about this. Going on offense means escalating the conflict. It means more time, more money, more stress. Are you sure you want to do that instead of just waiting for their lawsuit to fail?" I thought about Amber standing on my porch with that confident smile, calling my home something they were owed. I thought about Derek's cowardice, letting her speak for him, making demands after everything he had already taken. I thought about lying awake at night worrying about whether they would show up again, whether they would find some way to take my house, whether I would ever feel safe again. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "They came after me. They threatened my home. They're trying to intimidate me into giving them money I don't owe them. I'm done being scared. I'm done being the victim. If they want to fight, I'll give them one they'll never forget." Patricia smiled, a sharp expression that reminded me why I had hired her. "All right then, let's make them regret ever knocking on your door." Over the next 2 weeks, we built our case. Patricia filed for a restraining order, documenting the threatening visit. the harassing letter from their attorney, and the pattern of behavior that had made me feel unsafe in my own home. We included character witnesses who could speak to my stability and Derek's vindictiveness. We attached financial records showing that I had paid for the house and that the divorce settlement clearly awarded it to me. The hearing for the restraining order was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I took the day off work and met Patricia at the courthouse. My stomach twisted with anxiety and anticipation. Derek and Amber were there with Grant Hewitt, all three of them looking confident and unconcerned, like this was a minor inconvenience rather than a serious legal proceeding. When I walked into the courtroom, Amber looked at me and smiled, that same bright, patronizing smile from my doorway. She leaned over to whisper something to Derek, and they both laughed quietly. The casual cruelty of it made my hands ball into fists. But Patricia touched my arm in warning, reminding me without words to stay calm and composed. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Martinez, called the case to order. Patricia presented our evidence methodically, walking through each incident, each threatening communication, each reason I felt unsafe. She was articulate and passionate, making it clear that this was not a petty dispute between ex-spouses, but a pattern of harassment that had escalated to threatening my home and my security. When it was Grant Hewitt's turn to respond, he stood and delivered what I can only describe as a performance. He painted Derek as a victim of a vindictive ex-wife who was using the legal system to punish him for moving on. He claimed I was fabricating threats to avoid having to honor Derek's legitimate ownership stake in the property. He suggested that I was emotionally unstable and that the restraining order was just another attempt to control and harm Derek. It was a masterclass in manipulation, twisting every fact, reframing every piece of evidence, making me sound like the aggressor rather than the victim. I felt my face burning with anger and humiliation as he spoke, painting me as some kind of vindictive harpy who could not accept that her marriage had ended. But Judge Martinez did not seem impressed. She interrupted him several times to ask pointed questions about the basis for Derek's ownership claim, about why he had not raised these issues during the divorce proceedings, about what specific threats I had made that justified his characterization of me as dangerous. Grant stumbled over his answers, falling back on vague assertions and legal jargon that did not actually address her questions. And with each stumble, I felt a small spark of hope grow brighter. When both sides had presented their cases, Judge Martinez took a long moment to review the documents in front of her. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of pages turning and the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, she looked up and began to speak. "I've reviewed the divorce settlement and the property records. The house in question was explicitly and unambiguously awarded to Ms. Foster. There is no clerical error. There is no ongoing ownership claim. Mr. Crawford signed documents relinquishing any interest in the property. That matter is settled and not subject to re-litigation." Grant started to object, but Judge Martinez held up her hand. "Furthermore, showing up at someone's home uninvited to make demands about property you have no claim to constitutes harassment. Sending threatening letters through your attorney when you know those threats have no legal basis constitutes harassment. I am granting the temporary restraining order. Mr. Crawford and Ms. Hammond are prohibited from contacting Ms. Foster directly or indirectly, from coming within 500 feet of her home or workplace, and from making any further claims about the property through legal channels or otherwise. Any violation will result in immediate sanctions, including possible jail time." She turned her sharp gaze to Grant Hewitt. "As for you, counselor, I am warning you now that filing frivolous lawsuits and making baseless claims is unethical and potentially sanctionable conduct. If you file anything else on this matter without legitimate legal basis, I will refer you to the State Bar for disciplinary proceedings. Am I clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," Grant said, his confidence finally cracking. "Good. This hearing is adjourned." I walked out of that courtroom feeling 10 feet tall. Patricia was grinning, actually grinning, squeezing my arm in congratulations. Behind us, I could hear Grant trying to explain to Derek and Amber what had just happened. his voice low and defensive. As we passed them in the hallway, Amber tried to catch my eye, but I looked straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge her existence. They had lost, publicly, definitively, with a judge telling them in no uncertain terms that they were wrong and that their behavior was unacceptable. It should have been the end. It should have been closure, final proof that I had won, and they had nothing left to threaten me with. But as Patricia and I celebrated over coffee in the courthouse cafeteria, I could not shake the feeling that this was not over. People like Derek and Amber did not accept defeat gracefully. They did not walk away just because a judge told them to. And if they were desperate enough to lie in court, desperate enough to risk sanctions and restraining orders, then they were desperate enough to try something else. I was right to be worried. 3 days after the restraining order was granted, I came home from an evening shift at the hospital to find my house had been broken into. The front door was still locked when I arrived home that night, which initially made me think everything was fine. But as I stepped inside, I noticed immediately that something was wrong. The air felt different, disturbed, like someone had recently moved through it. A drawer in the entryway table was slightly open when I knew I had closed it that morning. My keys rattled in my shaking hand as I stood frozen in the doorway, trying to decide whether to go inside or call the police immediately. I chose the police. Standing on my front porch under the glow of the light I had left on, I dialed and explained that I believed someone had been in my home. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes, and I waited outside while they cleared the house room by room, checking closets and behind doors, making sure no one was still inside. When they gave me the all-clear, I walked through with them, and the violation became apparent. Drawers had been opened and rifled through, their contents slightly disturbed, but not obviously stolen. My bedroom closet had been searched, boxes pulled down from the top shelf and not quite put back correctly. The home office where I kept important documents had been thoroughly examined, filing cabinet drawers open, papers not quite in the right order. But here was the strange part. Nothing significant appeared to be missing. My laptop was still on my desk. My television and electronics were untouched. The jewelry box in my bedroom, which contained my grandmother's pearls and my mother's engagement ring, had not been opened. Whoever had broken in was not looking for things to steal. They were looking for something specific. "Do you have any idea what they might have been searching for?" one of the officers asked, a young man with kind eyes and a notebook he kept flipping through. "Documents, maybe. Information. I'm going through a legal dispute with my ex-husband. There's a restraining order against him as of 3 days ago." I showed them the order on my phone, watching their expressions shift from routine concern to serious attention. "You think your ex-husband did this?" "I don't know if he did it personally, but yes, I think he's involved. Or his girlfriend, or someone they hired." The officers took photographs and dusted for fingerprints, though they warned me that most burglars wore gloves. They checked the perimeter of the house and found evidence that someone had forced open a window in the back, the lock broken, the screen removed, and leaned against the side of the house. The security cameras I had recently installed should have caught something, but when we reviewed the footage, there was a suspicious 4-hour gap where the system had gone offline. "Someone jammed your cameras," the older officer explained, pointing to the timestamp. "This was planned. They knew what they were doing." After the police left, I sat in my living room, unable to shake the feeling of violation. Someone had been in my home, touching my things, searching through my private papers, invading the sanctuary I had worked so hard to create. The locks I had changed, the security system I had installed, none of it had been enough to keep them out. I called Patricia even though it was nearly 11 at night. She answered, sounding alert despite the hour, and I explained what had happened. "Did you check to see if any documents are missing? Particularly anything related to the divorce or the house?" I went to my filing cabinet and carefully examined the contents. The divorce settlement was still there. The deed to the house was still there. Bank statements and tax records appeared untouched. But then I noticed something. A folder that had contained personal correspondence, letters I had saved from before the divorce, was missing several pages. They were not important documents, just sentimental items, Notes Derek had written me early in our marriage. Cards from anniversaries and birthdays. Why would they take old love letters? I asked Patricia, confused. They wouldn't, unless they planned to use them somehow. Maybe to forge something. Maybe to manipulate the narrative. Maybe just to hurt you. People do cruel things when they're desperate. File a police report specifically noting the restraining order and the suspicious timing. I'll submit this to the court as evidence that Derek and Amber are continuing to harass you, despite the court order. I did not sleep that night. I lay in my bed listening to every sound, every creak of the house settling, every rustle of wind through the trees outside, convinced that someone was coming back. The violation of the break-in had shattered the small sense of security I had been rebuilding. Now my home did not feel like a sanctuary. It felt like a target. The next morning, exhausted and jittery from too much coffee and too little sleep, I went to work. I tried to focus on my patients, on the immediate needs in front of me, but my mind kept drifting back to my house, wondering if someone was there right now, wondering what else they might do. During my lunch break, I received a notification from Facebook. Someone had tagged me in a post. My stomach sank as I opened the app, already knowing this would not be good. Amber had posted a long emotional statement about how she and Derek were being persecuted by a vindictive ex-wife who could not accept that Derek had moved on. She painted me as obsessive and unstable, claiming I had been harassing them, making false accusations, using the legal system to punish Derek for falling in love with someone else. She included carefully edited quotes from court documents that made me sound unreasonable and controlling. The post had been up for 3 hours and already had dozens of comments, mostly from people I did not know, Amber's followers and friends, expressing sympathy and outrage on her behalf. A few of our mutual acquaintances had even liked or commented supportively, apparently believing her version of events without question. I felt sick reading it, seeing how she had twisted everything, how she had made herself and Derek the victims, and me the aggressor. And I could not respond because the restraining order prohibited contact, which meant I could not even defend myself publicly without potentially violating the court order. I called Patricia again. She's posting about me on social media, making me look like I'm harassing them when they're the ones who broke into my house. Screenshot everything. Don't respond. Don't engage. Just document. This actually helps us because it shows they're continuing to harass you despite the restraining order. Posting false statements about you on social media could be considered defamation and definitely violates the spirit of the order. We'll bring it to the judge's attention. But people believe her. They think I'm this crazy ex-wife. My reputation is being destroyed. Your reputation with strangers who don't know you and are never going to be part of your life. The people who matter, who know you, they know the truth. Don't let her manipulate you into doing something that will actually make you look bad. She's trying to provoke you. Don't take the bait. I knew Patricia was right, but it was hard. Over the next few days, Amber continued her social media campaign, posting vague references to dealing with difficult people, sharing inspirational quotes about overcoming obstacles, and not letting negative people dim your light. Each post was clearly directed at me, and her followers ate it up, leaving supportive comments about how strong and graceful she was being in the face of such adversity. Meanwhile, I had to stay silent, watching my character be assassinated online while I focused on documenting everything for the legal fight ahead. It felt deeply unfair, but I was learning that fairness was not always immediate, that sometimes you had to let people reveal themselves while you quietly built your case. A week after the break-in, I received a certified letter. It was from a law firm I did not recognize, representing someone named Crystal Morrison. The letter informed me that Crystal was claiming to be Derek's ex-girlfriend from before he met me, and that she was alleging Derek and I had gotten together while he was still in a relationship with her. She was threatening to sue me for alienation of affection and emotional distress, seeking damages of $50,000. I stared at the letter in disbelief. Alienation of affection was an archaic legal concept that was not even recognized in most states anymore. And the timeline did not make sense. Derek and I had gotten together 18 years ago. The statute of limitations for any such claim would have long since expired. This was clearly another manufactured crisis, another attempt to harass and intimidate me. But it was also clever. Even though the lawsuit would ultimately fail, I would have to respond to it, hire a lawyer to defend against it, spend time and money fighting something completely baseless. It was harassment by legal procedure, using the court system itself as a weapon to exhaust my resources and my will to fight. When I showed the letter to Patricia, she actually laughed, though it was a bitter sound. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. This is pure harassment. No legitimate attorney would file this case. It's frivolous on its face. So what do? We respond. We get it dismissed. And we add it to our mounting evidence that Derek and Amber are engaging in a coordinated campaign of harassment. Every stupid move they make just strengthens our position. They're burying themselves and don't even realize it. How long can this go on, Patricia? How many lawyers can they hire to file ridiculous lawsuits? How much money am I supposed to spend defending myself against lies? As long as they have money to waste and stupidity to burn. But here's the thing, Natalie. They're getting desperate. Desperation leads to mistakes. And they're making plenty of mistakes. We just need to be patient and let them self-destruct. But patience was hard when I was living in a constant state of anxiety, when every notification on my phone made my heart race, when I could not sleep in my own home without jumping at every sound. I was functioning, going to work and paying my bills and maintaining the appearance of normalcy. But inside I was eroding, worn down by the constant assault on my peace. Maya visited again and found me in a state. I had not been eating properly or sleeping more than a few hours a night. My house, usually meticulously maintained, had dishes in the sink and laundry piled on the couch. I was surviving but not thriving, and she could see it immediately. "This has to stop," she said firmly, taking charge in the way younger sisters sometimes do when older sisters fall apart. "You can't let them destroy you like this. You're letting them win. I don't know how to make it stop. Every time we shut down one attack, they launch another. It's like fighting a hydra. Or then maybe it's time to cut off the head instead of fighting the individual snakes. What do they really want? Money, right? They're desperate for money. So what if we found a way to make them more desperate, to expose them publicly, to make continuing this fight more costly than walking away? What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we do some investigating, figure out exactly how broke they are, exactly what pressure they're under, and then apply more pressure. Make them choose between coming after you and dealing with their own problems. That sounds like we would be stooping to their level." "No, stooping to their level would be breaking into their home and lying in court and launching smear campaigns on social media. What I'm suggesting is simply revealing the truth about who they really are. If that happens to make their lives harder, well, maybe they should have thought about that before they came after you." I hesitated, uncomfortable with the idea of actively going after them, rather than just defending myself. But I was also exhausted, worn down by months of attacks, tired of being reactive instead of proactive. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe it was time to fight back in a way that actually hurt them, rather than just deflecting their attacks. "What did you have in mind?" Over the next week, Maya and I became amateur investigators. We created fake social media profiles and started following Amber's contacts, paying attention to who she interacted with, where she checked in, what she revealed about her life. We discovered she was deeply in debt, with multiple credit cards maxed out and collection agencies pursuing her. We found out Derek had been fired from his sales job, not quit like his LinkedIn suggested, for falsifying expense reports. We learned they were on the verge of eviction from their apartment for non-payment of rent. We also found something more interesting. Amber had been married before, to a wealthy older man who had died under questionable circumstances. She had inherited a substantial amount, but had burned through it within 2 years. There were forum posts from people who knew her, calling her a gold digger, warning men to stay away from her, sharing stories of her manipulative behavior. She has a pattern, Maya said as we compiled our findings. She targets men with money or assets, bleeds them dry, then moves on to the next one. Derek is just her latest mark, and your house is the asset she's trying to get her hands on. But Derek doesn't have access to my house. The divorce settlement was clear. She doesn't know that. Or she does know it, but convinced Derek she could get around it somehow. Either way, she's driving this. He's just weak enough to go along with it. Armed with this information, I met with Patricia to discuss our options. She looked over everything Maya and I had compiled, her expression growing more satisfied with each page. This is good. This is very good. It establishes a pattern of predatory behavior. It shows financial desperation. It provides context for why they're pursuing you so aggressively. We can't use all of it in court, but we can use some of it. And the rest, well, sometimes information is power, even when it's not admissible as evidence. What do you mean? I mean, sometimes letting people know that you know their secrets is enough to make them back down. If Amber realizes you've discovered her past, if she understands that you could make that information public, she might decide you're more trouble than you're worth. Are you suggesting I blackmail them? I'm not suggesting anything illegal. I'm simply noting that the truth can be a powerful deterrent. How you choose to let them know you possess that truth is up to you. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to expose them publicly, to post everything we had found on social media for all their friends and followers to see, to destroy Amber's carefully curated image the way she had tried to destroy mine. But another part of me recognized that would make me just like her, willing to hurt people to get what I wanted. In the end, I chose a middle path. I created a detailed document outlining everything I had discovered about both Derek and Amber, their financial problems, her past, his firing, the debt, all of it carefully sourced and documented. Then I sent it to Grant Hewitt, their attorney, with a simple cover letter. This information has been compiled and verified. It is currently in my private possession. However, if your clients continue to harass me, continue to file frivolous lawsuits, or continue to violate the restraining order, I will have no choice but to make this information public in my own defense. I do not want to harm anyone's reputation. I simply want to be left alone. The choice of how this proceeds is entirely up to your clients. It was not a threat exactly. It was a statement of fact presented as a choice. They could walk away now, or they could continue fighting and risk having their secrets exposed. I was giving them an exit ramp, a way to back down without completely losing face. 3 days later, I received a call from Grant Hewitt. His tone was different now, less aggressive, almost conciliatory. Ms. Foster, I've reviewed the information you sent. My clients are prepared to cease all legal action against you and comply fully with the restraining order. In exchange, they're asking that you agree not to disseminate the information you've compiled. They're asking for a mutual non-disclosure agreement? In essence, yes. You leave them alone. They leave you alone. And everyone moves on with their lives. I should have felt victorious. This was what I wanted. For them to leave me alone. For the harassment to stop. For my life to return to normal. But I also felt cheated somehow. Like they were getting away with everything they had done to me. Walking away without real consequences. I want more than a mutual agreement to stay away from each other, I said carefully. I want a written acknowledgement that their claims about the house were false. I want an apology for the break-in, even if they don't admit to doing it directly. And I want them to post a retraction of everything Amber said about me on social media. There was a long pause. That might be difficult. My clients maintain they did nothing wrong. Then I guess they'll have to live with their secrets becoming public, because I'm not agreeing to protect people who won't even acknowledge what they did to me. Another pause, longer this time. Let me talk to them. I'll get back to you. 2 days later, Grant called back. Derek and Amber agreed to my terms. They would sign a document admitting the house was solely mine, and they had no claim to it. They would provide a written apology for any distress they had caused. Amber would post a statement on social media clarifying that she had been mistaken in her previous posts about me. In exchange, I would sign a non-disclosure agreement about the information I had compiled, and we would all agree to have no further contact with each other. The restraining order would remain in place, but there would be no further legal proceedings on either side. Patricia drew up the agreement, making sure every clause protected me. Every term was enforceable. When she sent it to Grant for review, he had his client sign it within 24 hours. Apparently, the threat of exposure was more motivating than I had realized. The day the signed agreements arrived, I sat in Patricia's office reading through them, seeing Derek's signature acknowledging that he had no claim to my house, seeing Amber's name on a document apologizing for causing me distress, seeing it all in legal language that made it binding and permanent. "How do you feel?" Patricia asked. "Relieved, exhausted, angry that it took this much to make them stop, sad that my marriage ended with lawyers and threats and fighting over a house. I don't know. It's complicated. Justice usually is, but you won, Natalie. You protected yourself and your home. You stood up to people who tried to intimidate and manipulate you. That takes real strength. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like survival. Sometimes they're the same thing." That evening, I saw Amber's post on social media. It was carefully worded, clearly written by a lawyer, admitting that she had made statements about me that were inaccurate and that she regretted any harm those statements had caused. It was not exactly the heartfelt apology I had wanted, but it was public acknowledgement that she had been wrong, and that mattered. The comments on the post were interesting. Some of her followers offered support, saying everyone makes mistakes. But others, people who had apparently been following the drama, called her out for her behavior. A few even shared their own experiences with her, corroborating the pattern I had discovered. Amber disabled comments within an hour and set her profile to private soon after. I did not feel victorious exactly. I felt drained and sad and older somehow, like I had been through a war that had aged me beyond the months it had actually taken. But I also felt something else, a quiet certainty that I had done what I needed to do to protect myself, that I had been strong when strength was required, that I had not let them destroy me. In the weeks that followed, my life slowly returned to normal. The constant anxiety faded. I started sleeping through the night again. I could check my phone without my heart racing, open my door without wondering if they would be standing there. The house felt like mine again, safe and secure, a sanctuary I had fought to keep. I installed better security, not because I expected them to come back, but because I needed the peace of mind. I repainted my bedroom in a soft blue that made me feel calm. I planted new flowers in the garden and spent hours with my hands in the soil, grounding myself in the physical work of growing things. My friends celebrated with me, taking me out for dinner and toasting my victory. Maya sent me a gift basket with a card that said, "To my badass sister who refuses to be broken." My mom called from Florida, crying with relief that the nightmare was finally over. But the person I talked to most about it all was my therapist, Dr. Chen, who had been helping me process the divorce and its aftermath for over a year. We spent sessions unpacking what had happened, examining not just Derek and Amber's behavior, but my own responses, the ways I had protected myself and the ways I had struggled. "You've been through a trauma," Dr. Chen said during one session. "Multiple traumas, really? The betrayal of your marriage, the divorce, and then this extended campaign of harassment. That's a lot to process. Give yourself permission to not be okay yet. But it's over. I should feel better. Healing is not linear. You're safe now, which is important. But your nervous system has been in fight or flight mode for months. It takes time to come down from that to trust that the danger has really passed. Be patient with yourself." I tried to follow her advice, to be gentle with myself, to accept that recovery would be a process rather than an event. Some days were easier than others. Some days I felt strong and victorious. Other days I felt fragile and damaged, wondering if I would ever fully trust anyone again. 6 months after the settlement was signed, I was working in my garden on a Saturday afternoon when a car pulled up in front of my house. My body tensed automatically, that learned response to unexpected visitors. But when the driver stepped out, I saw it was not Derek or Amber. It was a woman I did not recognize, probably in her mid-40s with kind eyes and an uncertain smile. She approached my fence cautiously. "Are you Natalie Foster?" "Yes. Can I help you?" "I hope so. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm Derek's new co-worker. Well, actually, I'm his boss. He started working at my company about 4 months ago." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "I found your name in some paperwork he left in the office printer. I Googled you, found some information about the restraining order, and I felt like I needed to warn you." My stomach dropped. "Warn me about what?" "Derek is not who he claims to be. I hired him based on a resume that I'm now realizing was mostly fabricated. He's been stealing from the company, small amounts, but consistently. And I've discovered he's been having an affair with one of my employees while still living with Amber. The employee just filed a harassment complaint because he's been pressuring her to leave her husband for him. I absorbed this information, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. Derek had not changed. He was still the same person, making the same choices, leaving wreckage in his wake. "I'm sorry he's causing problems for your company, but I'm not sure why you're telling me this. Because when I confronted him about the theft, he said he needed the money to pay legal bills from dealing with his crazy ex-wife, who was trying to ruin his life. He painted himself as this victim, and I almost believed him until I did some research. I wanted you to know that I see through him now, and I wanted to ask if there's anything I should know, any other ways he might be planning to cause harm, either to me, my company, or to you." I invited Lauren inside and made coffee, and we talked for over an hour. I told her the full story, not sparing Derek or myself, trying to give her an honest picture of who she was dealing with. She took notes and asked thoughtful questions, and by the end of our conversation, I could see her anger transforming into determination. "I'm going to prosecute him for the theft," she said firmly, "and I'm going to make sure everyone in our industry knows what he did. He's not going to keep moving from company to company, leaving destruction behind him." "Good," I said, meaning it. "He needs to face real consequences. Maybe this time he will." After Lauren left, I felt something shift inside me. For months, I had been focused on protecting myself, on defending my territory, on making sure Derek and Amber could not hurt me anymore. But I had not really thought about the broader pattern, the way Derek moved through life taking advantage of people, the way Amber targeted vulnerable men, the way they both seemed to believe they were entitled to whatever they wanted, regardless of who got hurt. They were not going to change unless consequences forced them to, and maybe, just maybe, those consequences were finally catching up to them. Over the following months, I heard through various sources what was happening with Derek and Amber. Derek was arrested for embezzlement from Lauren's company. Amber left him shortly after, apparently unwilling to stand by a man who had no assets left to exploit. Derek moved back in with his elderly parents, broke and facing criminal charges. Amber started dating someone new, another divorced man with money, repeating her pattern. I did not take pleasure in their downfall exactly, but I did feel a sense of cosmic justice, a recognition that eventually people face the consequences of their choices. They had tried to take everything from me, and in the end they had destroyed themselves. A year after the settlement, I was in a completely different place. I had been promoted at work, taking on a leadership role in the emergency department. I had started dating someone new, a kind man named James, who was a teacher and had no interest in playing games or creating drama. We took things slowly, building trust brick by brick, and it felt healthy in a way my relationship with Derek never had. I had reconnected with old hobbies and made new friends. I traveled for the first time in years, taking trips I had always wanted to take but had postponed during my marriage. I invested in myself, in therapy and education, and experiences that enriched my life rather than depleting it. My house, the one I had fought so hard to keep, became more than just a physical structure. It became a symbol of my strength, my resilience, my refusal to let other people's cruelty define my life. Every room held memories now, Not of my failed marriage, but of my successful recovery. The kitchen where I learned to cook new recipes. The living room where I hosted dinner parties with real friends. The garden where I spent hours creating beauty from soil and seeds and patience. Sometimes sitting on my back porch with a cup of coffee watching the sun rise. I would think about that morning when Derek and Amber had shown up at my door, demanding what was theirs. I would remember the shock and fear I had felt, the way their presence had threatened to undo all the healing I had achieved. And then I would look around at the life I had built despite them, the peace I had reclaimed, the strength I had discovered in myself. They had tried to take my home, my security, my sense of safety in the world. They had failed. Not because I was perfect or because I never struggled, but because I had refused to let them win, because I had fought back, strategically and effectively, because I had learned that protecting yourself is not selfish, but necessary. Maya called one evening about 18 months after everything had been settled. "I saw Derek at the grocery store today," she said. "He looked terrible. Aged 10 years. He tried to talk to me, to ask about you. I told him you were doing great. And he should be ashamed of himself. How did he respond?" "He said he had made mistakes, that he wished he could go back and do things differently, that he hoped you were happy." I thought about that, about Derek having regrets, about him finally understanding what he had lost. Part of me, a small vindictive part, felt satisfied that he was suffering. But mostly I just felt sad for the years we had wasted, for the marriage that had been built on his lies, and my willingness to overlook them. "I am happy," I told Maya. "Not in spite of what happened, but partially because of it. I learned things about myself I never would have learned otherwise. I found strength I didn't know I had. I built a life that's actually mine, not one I was performing for someone else's benefit." "You sound different," Maya observed. "Lighter, more yourself." "I feel different. I feel like I finally understand what it means to value myself, to protect my own peace, to refuse to accept treatment that diminishes me. It took losing everything to learn that, but it was worth it. That conversation stayed with me. It crystallized something I had been feeling but had not articulated. The trauma of Derek's betrayal and the harassment that followed had been horrible, had caused real damage that I was still healing from, but it had also been transformative. It had forced me to develop boundaries I had never established before. It had taught me that I was stronger than I believed. It had shown me what I would not tolerate, what I would fight for, who I was when everything was stripped away. 2 years after that morning on my porch, I was invited to speak at a support group for people going through difficult divorces. The organizer had heard my story somehow, and thought others might benefit from hearing how I had navigated the challenges. I was hesitant at first, uncomfortable with the idea of being held up as some kind of inspiration when I still had days where I struggled with trust and anxiety. But I agreed to do it, and one evening I stood in front of 20 strangers and told my story. Not the sanitized version, but the real one. The betrayal and the harassment and the fear. The mistakes I had made and the things I wish I had done differently. The moments of weakness and the moments of strength. The long, slow process of healing and the setbacks that came with it. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then a woman in the back raised her hand. "How did you know when to fight and when to walk away?" I thought about the question carefully. I fought when they threatened things that mattered to me. My home, my security, my peace. I walked away from things that didn't actually matter, like defending myself to people who already believed their lies. You have to choose your battles based on what you're actually protecting versus just proving you're right. Another person asked, "What would you say to someone who's just discovered their partner has been lying to them?" I would say trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone convince you that you're being paranoid or oversensitive when you're actually just noticing what's really happening. And start protecting yourself immediately. Don't wait for it to get worse. Don't hope they'll change. Just start building your exit strategy and your support system. For 2 hours, I answered questions and listened to stories and watched people nod in recognition as I described experiences they were going through. In helping them, I found another piece of my own healing. My trauma had given me something valuable to share, a roadmap through darkness that might help someone else find their way. As I drove home that night, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for what Derek and Amber had done to me, but for what I had discovered about myself in the process of surviving them. I had learned that I was capable of protecting myself, of standing up to people who tried to intimidate me, of rebuilding after everything fell apart. Those were lessons I would carry forever, and they had made me into someone stronger and wiser than I had been before. 3 years after everything began, I was sitting in my garden with James, planning our future together. We were talking about maybe getting married eventually, but there was no rush, no pressure, just a comfortable certainty that we were building something real and healthy together. He knew my whole story, every difficult part, and he had never once made me feel damaged or broken because of it. "Do you ever regret fighting so hard for this house?" he asked, looking around at the space I had created. "Never. This house represents everything I survived. Every room is a testament to my strength. Walking away from it would have felt like letting them win, like accepting that I didn't deserve to keep what I had built. What if they had won? What if the courts had somehow sided with them? Then I would have grieved, and I would have started over somewhere else. But I would have known I fought, that I didn't just roll over and accept their manipulation. That knowledge would have gone with me, wherever I went." He nodded, understanding in a way that made me grateful for his presence in my life. "You're remarkable. You know that? I'm just someone who refused to be destroyed. There's nothing remarkable about survival." "I disagree. Survival is extraordinary, especially when people are actively trying to break you." We sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in the city, Derek was living with the consequences of his choices. Somewhere, Amber was probably targeting another vulnerable person, continuing her pattern. But they were not my problem anymore. They were not my focus. They had become just a chapter in my story, an important one that had taught me crucial lessons, but not the defining chapter. The defining chapter was what I was living now, the peace I had created, the love I had found, the strength I had discovered, the life I was building with intention and boundaries and a clear understanding of my own worth. Today I learned that home is not just a physical structure, but a sense of safety you create and defend. I learned that people who try to take what is yours are often desperate and broken themselves, but that understanding their brokenness does not mean accepting their abuse. I learned that the legal system can be used as a weapon by cruel people, but that truth and documentation eventually prevail if you are patient and